the cognition of innovative teaching methods of adult learning in view of international knowledge and cooperation. When I first looked at that, I thought, oh gosh, I'm not quite sure about that title. It's so, intricate. The Oxford Dictionary helped me out because of my English. Cognition is the mental process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. Really important, that combination. So I wanted to tell you about, throughout my adult life, adult education has been really important, and the process that actually changed my world. On the way, I think I've worked with students to change their worlds. And on the way, I think I was responsible for changing the world even just a little bit by challenging common sense and helping to develop really useful knowledge and confidence. A couple of weeks ago, Yoshka wrote to me and said, I believe you were a tutor at the Open University. No, I've never been a tutor. But what you're remembering is that I have an Open University degree. Oh, this is very interesting, he flattered me. So perhaps you'd like to tell your personal story. Because I think I've got the background that a professional politician would absolutely love to have. It's the sort of rags to riches type story. I was born into a very typical, very loving Scottish family where my parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles were all really important. Most importantly, I was born living on a slum, in the centre of Glasgow, a very notorious slum. And the dream in those days was that you would move out of this to one of the big projects, housing projects, one of them called Easter House, which became notorious. It was built as a modern slum. No amenities, no facilities for people, and it actually became the subject of many sociological and political reports. But when I was 5, my life changed. I went to live in the northeast of England, where my father was brought up. My grandfather, who it was rumoured was a horse dealer and a gambler, had died and left my father a little house, 3-bedroomed house. This absolutely changed our lives. It was a family story that he'd gambled. He was a gambler and he'd won this house. But however he got these riches, it became my father's. And I became a Geordie. That's somebody who lives in the northeast of England. Now, a couple of weeks ago, my 8-year-old granddaughter said to me, Grandma, my teacher says, unless you can speak properly, you can't learn to spell. And I think in life, there are little moments in life where some little personal mystery unfolds. And I thought, yes, this is really peculiar. When I was 5, I had a very broad Glaswegian accent, which is thought of in England to be quite rough, uneducated, rough accent, where Geordie accents are soft and friendly. I think this is one of the reasons why I got placed in the middle stream. Adult educators, I think we have to recognise that political and social decisions are actually made for children, and these are critical in their life stories. Mistakes are made, but they're not irrevocable. And there's a tremendous amount of research about articulate children achieving because they're articulate, because they use language skills, because they learn language at a very early age. I don't think it's because the children have problems with learning that they're not articulate. I think it's that we as teachers assume they have problems. And there becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of not succeeding. So I went through to the age of 10 in classes in the B stream. So not the A stream and not the C stream. It was okay. In England, there was, in those days, an 11+ exam. I sat mine when I was 10, but it was an 11+ exam. This separated out children to either go to secondary school or a grammar school. And in a secondary modern school, it was designed for more skills-based. And really, when looking back, we talk about producing factory fodder. Yeah, you know the term? So grammar school children were actually tutored for the academic arts and sciences, and if they were bright, they'd get the opportunity to go to a university. So from the age of 5, I'd been placed alongside millions of other children in the UK in streams which said, not good enough. Not good enough to be an academic success. As a woman, I was stereotyped to fulfill womanly roles, stereotyped roles of my gender. I was groomed to be pretty and well-mannered and subservient. Maybe my education failed. Education policies were designed to keep women in the home, in office work if you were good, shops, offices, but you weren't groomed for careers, and you were never told that you could be a success. Looking back, I was happy. I had a good childhood, but I was very frustrated and very angry. I was a girl brought up to do domestic science, and I'm really pleased that I learnt these life skills. I still enjoy knitting and sewing, and I can cook, and I enjoy the homemaking. But these should have been recognised as good skills and go alongside academic work. I became very good at avoiding anything but practical work. When I was 12, I wanted to be a member of Parliament. And my father actually helped me lie about my age to join the Young Socialists and become politically active. So I was a bit bolshy then. My mother informed me, girls don't do that. You should get married and have babies. Okay, I left school at 15. I'd never had the opportunity to qualify. I'd never sat an exam. I'd never been trained to sit an exam. I'd just never had that opportunity. I did, however, thanks to my mum, learn to do typing and shorthand. I hated reading back the dictation. I hated that moment where you had to speak to your boss or read anything. But so I got married when I was 18. I didn't have babies. I was acknowledged a failure because I didn't have babies. Until I was 26, and by then I'd worked my way through the office system and became the personal assistant to a director of a company. But I was still this failure because I hadn't had babies. I did become pregnant, and in those days you had to leave work. You couldn't stay on as a pregnant woman. You had to leave. But I absolutely loved being a mum. I had status as a mother, I had responsibilities, and I made my family happy. no matter how wonderful it all was, I was bored. I could only see life as an appendage to a career-minded husband and children. I do remember, even as a confident mother, that I avoided reading even bedtime stories if there was another adult around. But I think this lack of confidence made me think, I've got to do something about this. And at 26, I decided to actually just do some night schools. I went to study for a General Certificate of Education qualifications, O-levels in English, language and literature. And I passed. I think I was the most surprised person that I'd passed. Okay, my husband got promotion at work and we moved from the northeast of England to York. Up mobility. I started to learn to entertain. I started studying sociology. And these were nice little hobbies. They didn't interfere with anybody in my family, and as long as I could find a babysitter, it was fine. But there were challenging days, but I was still staying in my comfort zone. I didn't have to enter a library. Libraries are sort of edifices of education, and you have to find your way round, and you have to be quiet, and they're intimidating. So the little voice inside me said, "Don't go into a library." My teacher, my sociology teacher, said to me, "Stop doing these exams. They're for kids. You're very good. Stop doing them. Go to the Open University." And he had an Open University degree, and he was very enthusiastic. And I think, you know, as adults who've experienced lack of opportunities for education, the view we have of ourselves changes and is coloured by the view of other people. So a teacher saying to me, "Stop doing these things kids do, go to a university," actually that changed my life really. That was a good moment. I think it's one of the reasons why John and I both say to students, if you're struggling, talk to us. Don't struggle in silence. If you fail, it's our fault. We need to support you. So after a lot of thought, a lot of talking to myself, I thought, and it became a phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway. I didn't have my own money, so I couldn't afford the fees, and I started cleaning my friend's house to save up. And I enrolled and became an undergraduate. Very clear. That was all fine. It was still a hobby. I was still in my little back bedroom studying. Books came to my door, and occasionally I would go to tutorials. The first block of course material arrived. I eagerly opened it. Beautifully prepared modules, books of learning, and I displayed them proudly. Mature students are always into self-sabotage. And it's absolutely typical that you do this. I didn't open the books to read them. I was absolutely terrified of that. And I went to the first tutorial, never having opened a book. And I bluffed my way through that. After 3 months, I dropped out. I just resigned. It was impossible. Not because I wasn't enjoying it, not because I didn't think I could do it, because my mother, my husband, everybody just put obstacles in my way. And it was true. You know, I had a dinner party, and one of my friends said, "Stop doing all this studying. You used to be nice." And guests at my table agreed. You know, I used to be nice. And it was true, because I spent a lot of time reading and writing. I stopped worrying about the price of tomatoes. And when I was pushing my trolley around the supermarket, I was worried about Karl Marx and Engels. And so I had problems, personal problems. So I resigned and dropped out. I decided that I would study once my children were grown up and I had a bit more time. Success meant to me that I wouldn't be loved. If I was successful at an academic career, I just wouldn't be loved. But failure meant that my future was boredom and unfulfillment, where I couldn't actually love myself. My OU tutor rang me up and said, come and have a drink. Okay, you've resigned, you've dropped out, you're going to study when you're older. You'll grow up, spoil your children, run after your husband, and become slowly old and menopausal. I thought about it, and I thought, he's right, I wouldn't ever study again. You know, I'd get into that syndrome, I'd never study when I was older. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I went back. I think this illustrates that when you take on a student, you take on the whole person. Learning and teaching isn't just about materials, it's not about the academic ability, it's what stops a student. What are the barriers that the student either puts in front of themselves or are suffering from? And the learning support has to be appropriate. The intervention a tutor makes is absolutely critical, because again, this image that somebody has of you is really important, because your self-image is so low. I actually started enjoying it. I wasn't brilliant, but I studied in the middle of the night when the children were asleep. I studied on holiday trains and boats and planes. I even studied up a mountain in Switzerland once. Anywhere where it just didn't interfere with what my family wanted me to do. And the OU is an absolutely amazing institution that just encourages success. It's distance learning, and I'm sure you all know about the Open University. It's second chance education. It's now the largest academic institute in the UK, with more than 240,000 students, 7,000 tutors, and 1,000 academic staff, 3,500 support staff. The people who write the material are absolutely, I mean, there's some famous academic staff, academically rigorous material. And I used to go down to Milton Keynes occasionally, and I used to walk round the quadrangle so I could pass the office and the window of Professor Stuart Hall, who's a famous sociologist. And I just used to pass so I could have a look and see and think, he's one of my professors. But the Open University is absolutely academically rigorous. And one of the reasons is because the material is open. It's available in libraries, other universities use the material, and it's been proven as excellent quality. It's published and available. Shall I see what I can do here? I'm not sure.
Go back.
Go back.
Yeah, it's okay. Yosh, can you click on the link?
On the there's a link to the Open University.
Yeah.
Just a moment.
Technology.
Yeah, this is technology.
I can email things. Well, it was founded in 1969 after years of political negotiation. And it was thought of as the University of the Second Chance. I thought it was the University of the First Chance. For me, it was just almost a miracle, because you didn't have to have entry qualifications. You applied, you got accepted. Somebody would interview you to find out this whole person thing. Your first interview with your tutor was when you had a place and he was assessing what your needs would be. He was taking on the whole person. And he's still a friend. I still keep in touch with him. The Open University provide these modules. They also provide you with a list of additional information, reading. You don't have to read these. Reading and the learning is directed, and you're given questions at the outset that set your train of thought, so you know what the question is, what you're trying to find out from what you're reading. So you're being taught how to read, how to study, by the way in which you're studying. Everything's geared towards specific essays at the end of the learning process. And deadlines are placed there so that you have to study to a deadline. But chaotic lifestyles are catered for, and as long as you finish that study within that study year, tutors can support you by moving deadlines. And that's, people have chaotic lifestyles, families, things interfere, people die, people are born, that has to be catered for in academic institutions. Regular tutorials are held. But what was most important for me was that I was encouraged to be part of a study group. So you form study friendships, which do last a lifetime. It means that if you don't understand something that you've read, or you disagree with it, your political perspective is totally different and you want to argue with it, you find somebody or a group that will help you. And students become the teachers, which I've always thought was really important, and I've tried to practice that. It was in an immense commitment, lifelong commitment. It's 6 years to get a degree and 8 years to get an honours degree. I still avoided libraries. There was still a little voice in my head that said, don't go into a library, whatever you do. I studied for 3 years and I thought, I'm getting clever. But I hadn't stepped out of my little back bedroom. I hadn't stepped into a library, and I was still the same. I was still the focus of the family home. I told my husband that I was going to apply to York University, and he said, well, you won't get a place. Okay, I'll try. I tried. I applied to York University. But what was really important about that process of applying and my husband saying, you won't get a place, was that relationships change. And family relationships change, and eventually I did get divorced. But members of your family are threatened, or they don't like the person you're turning into. And that can be a tremendous drain on your time and your energy for study. Back to the whole person again. York University is one of the 4 prestigious universities in England. We used to, anyway, talk about Cambridge, Oxford, Durham and York. Not necessarily in that order. But I knew that if I wasn't accepted at York University, which was difficult to get into, I didn't stand a chance of getting into a university. It had to be near home. I continued to study at the Open University and got a 4th year under my belt. I got an offer letter at the same time and advice from the University of York that I had a place, but don't do the first year. You've proved you can be a success. Go straight into the second year. So don't do a 3-year degree, do a 2-year degree and get an honours degree. And I just can't tell you what that meant to me. It was just, well, miracles just don't happen like that. I studied at the degree ceremony. My parents were very proud and my family was there and took photographs. And afterwards my daughter said to me, "Were you scared?" She was about 11 at the time. "Were you scared when you went up the stairs and across that stage?" And I said, "No, you weren't scared. You were with all your friends that you'd studied with, and it was fine. You knew you weren't going to trip up, and if you were going to trip up, they would pick you up. It was okay." Her unforgettable words were, "I think I'll be scared when I get my degree." And I thought, that's success. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I now had children, a son and a daughter, who expected to go to university. I still get quite emotional when I think about that, because my daughter did go to York University and she did get a good degree there. I started to relax about life. I got a job. I then thought, I'm going to go back to studying. There were other things I wanted to learn. The joy of learning was just immense. And the Open University does stimulate and become a passion. I went back to study and finished my Open University degree, but I also got involved in the Open University Students' Association. And this was an immense experience, because I learned to implement all the things that I'd learned about my politics and sociology. I learned to go to meetings with academics, very successful, revered academics, and there was the student voice coming from me and my colleagues. We were represented on academic boards, and I became a member of the Senate, the decision-making body of the university. I became a vice president in charge of campaigning, and I got to know the Vice Chancellor, Sir John Horlock, personally. And I used to go to meetings with him. I went to the House of Parliament. I was on radio and television with the Vice Chancellor as a student rep. And the staff and the students, at that time, education was really seen as very political, and the Vice-Chancellor saw it as part of his role as a Vice-Chancellor to be political. And the Open University was under a great deal of stress, particularly funding stress, that he saw as his job to get involved in politics, and the students were important, and he mounted a big campaign to save the Open University, and the students were a really important part of all of that. So that was a big learning curve as well. When I actually got my Open University degree, you can go to a ceremony and you put your gown on and your parents are there and your family's there, and it's all very important. You can go anywhere in the country. They hold degree ceremonies everywhere. And I decided not to go to York. I decided to go back to Newcastle, where I had been first educated, because I wanted to say, I did it. You treated me like factory fodder, not good enough to educate. And I wanted to go back there at the age of 41 and say, I did it. And if you'd given me a chance, I could have done it earlier. I could have been much more responsible citizen. I could have been economically successful, but I wasn't given an opportunity by the stupid education system that we had. As my children were growing up, I got involved in a career. I eventually became the director of a very large charity, and then I became self-employed. I became an adult educator and a researcher, and I now read poetry and bedtime stories to my grandchildren. I even read and write my own poetry, and that's pleasure. I actually can't believe that I've published articles and reports, and that I helped new practitioners write a chapter in a book for the very first time, which I edited, supported them through the writing process. I edited, and it's used in universities for teaching about community development practice. And I can't believe that, because the little voice inside me says, oh, somebody's going to suss you out. You're a mature student. Don't believe what's going on, Marion. But feel the fear and do it anyway. I've had a very expensive education. I've been really privileged, and my world has changed, and I've helped to change the world of other people. And I've supported people to reach their potential, and that's been an immense privilege. But in the UK, the present education system is to train children to pass exams, not really to learn. It's a conveyor belt of tables and achievements, and the individual needs, or the joy of studying, is being forgotten. And we're turning back the clock in England because of the political pressures. I think adult educators will always pick up the pieces, but we have to remember that education and learning, particularly literacy, is 80 to 90% confidence. And as tutors, I've seen this week, you all must do that to your students as well. And it's been a privilege to listen to your passion. But I think we have to do better. I think it was John that was saying yesterday about campaigning and teaching for liberation and defiance. I think that's really important, and I think we have to remember it. And I remember working with the very first group of young gypsies that I worked with. And I said, did you know that Picasso was a gypsy? Gosh. Did you know that Eric Cantona is a gypsy? You can always get young boys particularly interested when they find out that Eric Cantona was gypsy. Wayne Rooney in our country, Ibrahimovic. I knew I would stumble. Ibrahimovic is a gypsy. These are all incredible role models to use with young people. It enhances their self-perception. And I think what they can then look at is they have really useful knowledge within them. What Yoshka, lovely phrase yesterday, said, ordinary knowledge. Their ordinary knowledge, in a way, they have to think of it as ordinary knowledge. It's really special, because it helps them with their everyday life. And it's inspirational to work with people like that. But adult literacy is about the whole person. I think somewhere I've got a slide. Yeah.
Oh, you have to close up the, close the
Too
note.
bad.
Close it.
Oh.
Closed it. You didn't mean literally close it, did you?
That's it.
It's good.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, yeah. I suppose my conclusion is that education is about transformation. It's really difficult for everybody involved, all the family members. As educators, we take on the whole person. Chrissy and I talked at the beginning of the week about going into a prison, which was a terrible experience, being searched and arguing with prison guards. to support a student. Study groups means that students support and learn from each other, and that they're usually the best teachers. And the best tutors are those that facilitate that process of students teaching each other. Students, and it's worth repeating, isn't it? Students have really useful knowledge or ordinary knowledge. And your enthusiasm and your passion means that you'll be professional and academically rigorous. I've seen some lovely young people, particularly around this table, who have been doing inspiring work. And I can tell that it's fun to work with you. I think that's absolutely brilliant, because when people are having fun, they learn the most. So don't alter that passion. Let it take you through life, because you will be professional, good workers if you do that. I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions?
If you want. About
It's not a question.
Comment.
It's a comment. I'm sorry. I'm so nervous. No, it's
It's okay. Last night I was reading this out to Chrissy and John in the room, and I had to stop. I couldn't continue reading it because it was emotional. I'll stop now. Thank you.
Marianne,
Thank you.
I have a single comment to you. It's a very, very fine story. And it proves to me if you can crash the code and a new world opens.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's what learning is about.
Absolutely. Totally.